Okay, this is going to be a box plot problem that was on the 2000 question, year 2000, and it's problem number 3. And 500 randomly selected middle-aged men and 500 randomly selected young adult men were rated on a scale from 1 to 10 on their physical flexibility, with 10 being the most flexible. And if we just think about this, probably the younger you are, the more flexible you are. So we would expect younger men to have more flexibility than middle-aged men. The ratings appear in the frequency table below. For example, 17 middle-aged men had a flexibility rating of 1. So what they're saying is these are the flexibility ratings. And so if we look at a rating of 3, 49 middle-aged men had a flexibility rating of 3, while 29 young men had a flexibility rating of 3, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to need to enter this data into our calculator. Now, keeping in mind, these are frequencies, and this is the actual rating. So we'll put this data into L1, we'll put this data into L2, and we'll put this data into L3. Remember, we're just going to go to Stat Edit, and then enter those data. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 all the way through, and I have L2 and L3. We do not want to sort this data because we need to make sure that 3 is associated with 49 and 29. So we don't want to sort this like we would if it were doing a stem plot. So we cannot sort this data because we have, these are the actual quantities of people who had this rating. As in 87 men had a flexibility rating of 6, and 69 young men had a flexibility rating of 6. So the first thing it asks us to do is display it graphically so that the flexibility of middle-aged men and young men can be easily compared. So basically, we're going to need to make a graph. And by the way, this is one of the very few times that they've had us input a lot of data. Once again, we put this into L1, this into L2, this into L3, and I'm just going to write that there see real quickly. All right. So here's what I'm going to go. I'm going to go to second, that button, to stat plot. And I want my first stat plot on, so I arrow over to the right. And I'm going to drop down and select the one that has the dots, the one showing the outliers. My X list, that's my flexibility rating, should be second one. I needed to read 1. And my frequency, now this time I have a frequency, and that's my middle-aged men frequency. And so I'm going to use second followed by the number 2, because now I have my frequency for them. And if I press graph, or if I press zoom followed by the number 9, now every now and then your calculator, some of these calculators will mess up. And if you get that screen, it's not a big deal. Press clear, then press zoom followed by the number 9. And so we get that graph. Well, what would be much more effective is if we could show both graphs at the same time. And in fact, we can. So we're going to go second stat plot, press enter. And I'm going to arrow over and select plot 2. Now I need to make sure I turn that on and press enter. I need to make sure that I selected the box plot with outliers, and now I have. My X list is still L1, so second one, but my frequency is in column L3. This is for the young men. All right. Making me think of YMCA, young men. All right, so zoom 9, and there we have them. And I can use the trace feature to get the important information. All right, a minimum value of 1, then Q1's at 4, 6, 7, and a max at 10. Dropping down, I can do the same thing for the young men. All right, so I need to go ahead and draw this. Well, it's extremely important that I have a scale. I just numbered them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And young men, make sure you label each graph, super important. Now, if you struggle at drawing a scale, I have one option for you, because I'm not very good at drawing a scale. This was done on the computer. So I could have, one of the ways I could do that is just label the major points. This is 1. This would be at 4. And I'd put Q1. This is my median at 6. This is Q3 at 7. And then my max at 10. And I could have done that for both graphs, done it for both of these, and that'd be fine. So if you want to just sit there and go, you know what, I'm going to label the important points, which is your 5-number summary, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I label those, we're good to go. All right, based on an examination of your graphical display, write a few sentences comparing. Make sure we're using comparison words like more, greater than, less than, etc. And the median flexibility scores differ by 1. Well, we see that from 6 to 7, with young men scores being higher at 7, while the middle-aged men is at 6. So not only did I use a comparison word of higher, I was very specific and gave the actual values, which suggests that young men have more flexibility than middle-aged men. The distribution of middle-aged men is reasonably symmetric, and you're like, well, how do you figure that? And I'm going to say that this distance is 6, which is pretty close to this distance over here. All right, not substantially different, a little bit different, but not much. So reasonably symmetric, so I qualified. While that of young men is skewed to the left, it's definitely substantially more skewed. And if you want to say middle-aged men is slightly skewed, you could do that and then say that young men is more skewed, and that would be fine as well. They would accept either one of those answers. The upper 50% of young men, so the upper 50%, starting here, have a flexibility ratings higher than 75% of middle-aged men. So the young men are at 7. So this 50% is higher than 75% of middle-aged men. Then finally, middle-aged men and young men flexibility scores both have a range of 10 and fall within the same values. Both distributions have interquartile ranges of 3. However, the young men's IQR covers the intervals 5 to 8, while the middle-aged men is 4 to 7, indicating that the middle 50% of the middle-aged men have less flexibility than that of young men. All right, so very important to cuss it out. I did not address unusual features because there were not. If you don't have them, you don't have to talk about them. But remember, center, shape, and spread, really important to cover. All right, so that will take care of that one. Thank you.